poem, and I think one of the things I love about your poetry the most is your love of detail and image, and how the details and the images of something, in this particular case the hat, widen into something that is universal. You know, the loss of tenderness in the world sort of seen through this hat. I don't know if you want to talk at all about grounding your poems in images or imagery and what that means to you.
Yeah, actually that's an issue that I care a great deal about in poetry, not just in my own poetry, but in all poetry. I want a poet to give me enough actual physical detail that I feel grounded in a particular place or with a particular person or in some situation that I can recognize, that I can touch almost. And then I want the poet to use that as a base from which to move into something larger and more abstract. And in fact, when I started writing the poem Little Hat, my experience was what it often is when I'm writing a poem, which is I'm saying to myself, for some reason, that object or that image is stuck in my mind's eye. I just want to write down some notes about it, so that I'll remember it. I don't know whether I'll turn it into a poem or not, but my experience with Little Hat was that I just simply wanted to record for my memory that hat that I saw in an antique shop.
Yeah.
And as I was describing the hat, then I was surprised to see the poem take a turn where my description was actually including the century in which that little hat from probably the 1930s was made.
Yeah.
So the poem surprised me.
Yeah. Well, who was it? Was it Frost who said, "No surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader"? And I think you're wonderful at that, just describing the hard details, the beautiful details of something, and then suddenly you feel something lift and widen. And I wanted to ask you to read a third poem, To My Friend Whose Neighbor is Trying to Steal Her Cat, also very different in tone.
Okay.
Just idle curiosity, was this a true story?
This was a true story, and in fact, this poem is also a poem written to someone. Little Hat is written to the hat. This poem is written to my best friend, Ann Bednarski, who in fact did tell me a story about a neighbor trying to steal her cat, and it just amused me as a story. So again, I turned to my notebook to record the story, and the poem has what I think of as a real working title. It gives a lot of information. To my friend whose neighbor is trying to steal her cat. At 6:30 a.m., you stand on your neighbor's lawn, calling your cat, who reclines on the deep porch, black paw and white paw playing with air, who pauses at the sound of his name, who stretches like the limousine of shadow at the foot of the maple. There is no place that Chipper does not live. That is the problem. And the fact that your neighbor will not promise not to feed him. It was fair enough in winter for her to rescue Chipper from the sill of the potting shed that week of storm and wind, the whole world lost in snow, and fair enough weeks later to welcome him back, companion in the garden, visitor for an afternoon. But now it is July. A blue bowl waits by her back door. Last week, you looked in your neighbor's front window and saw your wild cat curled on the couch, positioned before the television. Each day you are late to work because you must wake early, button jeans over your nightgown, and drive 3/4 of a mile to the farmhouse where Chipper goes by another name. You stand at the edge of your neighbor's lawn, calling your cat who spills across the dewy grass. Your cat who owns nothing, everything.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the image of the limousine that you set up in the beginning. Was that something that was integral to the poem or something that came later? Because it seems like the limousine sets up the power of the cat that happens later on.
You know, Sally, the limousine of shadow was a happy accident.
Yeah,
you know,
it's a beautiful image.
So much of writing for me is a sense of exploring, playing, being open to surprise. And Limousine of Shadow had a nice sound to it, and it seemed
It's a beautiful visual image too.
Visually rather accurate. And I thought, okay, I think the poem can accommodate that.
Well, for me, it was nice foreshadowing. I wanted to ask you to read Temporary Tattoo. I want to make sure that we get to hear as much of you as possible.
Now, Temporary Tattoo
is not in the book.
Not in the book.
I have it.
Oh, you have it.
I have it.
I'm so glad.
I realized a little late, maybe. There we are.
Yeah, Temporary Tattoo will be in my third book. And here it is. Okay, I don't think this needs an introduction,
I don't
really.
either. I think it's wonderful.
Okay. Temporary Tattoo. Beside the cash register in my favorite used bookstore, I see a glass bowl of what seem to be postage stamps until I look closer. Temporary tattoos of red and green with ornate black lettering, bruised apple books. Take one, says Andrew. Take two, as if he directs a film about the struggle of an independent bookseller and his aging clientele, some of them tattooed in the summer of love, some of them tattooed by surgery or time. I take one, although I know a temporary tattoo is oxymoronic, maybe just plain moronic, something else the world does not need, as no one needs the leather-bound collected Thackeray, or the first edition Joy of Sex inscribed, Love, from guess who? A tattoo should be permanent, a commitment, a cross-hatched cobra coiled around the biceps, inks of deep blue and green like the veins that pop from the carny's arm when he makes a fist. A tattoo should not smear, dissolve with baby oil on tissue, should be bold as a snake swallowing a mouse and the mouse shape traveling the length of it like a bad idea shaping a life, distorting a life. The apple is pink-red, like the tip of a cigarette. Its single leaf the green of the 1964 Chevy convertible on cinder blocks behind the bookstore. A car that will never run, despite the young man who works under the hood every night until dark. Someone should go to him and tell him the sum is not always greater than its parts. Sometimes the parts are what is valuable, what can be parlayed into a life. Tell him, sell the tires, sell the wheels. Tell him there is not enough light in all of his days to spend evenings with his back to the stars, staining his hands with grease and oil. Someone should give him the tattoo of the bruised apple, which will last a week at best. Tell him the Chevy's time has come and gone, that nothing lasts forever except our desire for things to last forever. But he is too young to know this, and nothing can convince him this is true. Nothing written in any of these books can show him what his strong hands seem to show as they fold the oily rag and drop the hood on another day, and in the gravel lot behind the bookstore, the last of the sun shines, pink, and everywhere and always.
I love that poem. I love the way that poem moves, and particularly the lines, which are so hard to get away with in a poem without sounding something. Nothing lasts but our desire for things to last forever. I'm ruining it a little bit, but it's a beautiful, beautiful line.
Well, you know, if I could just jump in to say, I love to read poems where I think the poet includes something that may not work or almost doesn't work.
Yeah.
To me, that's an exciting kind of risk. And so it's exciting for me to, you know, hear you say, well, gee, that line is
It
awfully
just feels
close
integral
to cliche.
and true.
Yeah.
Integral and true. You know, it's beautiful in the way you move from, you know, the tattoo to the man in the back who's working on the car. Just the movement in the poem is stunning. Right? My grandfather meets FDR.
Okay, it's just in the book.
I love that your book has a lot of your family's history, but has also a lot of the country's history.
You know, I don't think of myself as someone who writes poems about my family. I often think of myself as someone who writes about history and place, but my family members do show up, and this
Well, they're the particulars.
they are the particulars. And I would say for the record that this poem is actually based on an exercise that I've given my students often, which is write a poem about someone you know meeting a famous person from history.
I might steal that.